It's time for us to check back in with the homecoming and see what happens next. If you've missed any of the previous readings, just look in the description below for a playlist. "Daddy home yet?" he asked Olivia as he walked into the kitchen. "Not yet," answered Olivia from the kitchen sink where she was plucking the feathers from the turkey. He placed the bucket of milk on the kitchen table and strained it into the scalded, clean mason jars Olivia had standing ready. When this was done, he placed the filled jars in the refrigerator, then turned to join his grandparents and his brothers and sisters who were in the living room listening to Fibber, McGee, and Molly on the radio. "Buttermilk's still got to be churned, Clayboy," called Olivia. "Churning is woman's work, Mama," said Clayboy resentfully. "Work is work, boy," replied Olivia. "I'd do it, but I've got my hands full with this turkey. Why can't Becky do it? Because she splashes all over creation. I don't know what's the matter with that child." "The matter with her is she's 13 years old," answered Clayboy. "She'll live through it," smiled Olivia. "I just hope the rest of us do." Clayboy picked up the old earthenware butter churn and carried it by the handles into the living room. Grandma Ida had drifted off to sleep in the wingback chair, but Grandpa Homer was leaning toward the radio along with the children, waiting for Mr. Mayor of Wistful Vista to be admitted to the McGee household. Clayboy inserted the long wooden dasher into the churn and began the steady upward and downward churning that would turn the sour clabber into buttermilk. "Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor," cried Molly McGee as they heard the sound of a door opening and the booming voice of His Honor calling Merry Christmas to one and all. "I can't hear with you slapping that buttermilk around," said Becky to Clayboy. "Go jump in a lake," Clayboy advised Becky. "Y'all hush," warned Grandpa Homer. "The mayor's brought somebody with him." The mayor had brought Clark Dennis with him, and as Dennis's rich voice began singing Silent Night, Clayboy stopped his churning and Olivia came to the door to listen to the end. "Hot dang, that man can sing!" exclaimed Grandpa Homer, who slapped his knee sharply with his open palm to emphasize his admiration. Grandma Ida had awakened briefly during the song, but drifted off to sleep again. Now she came awake with a start when Fibber opened the door to his closet and all its contents spilled forth. "What's the matter?" gasped Grandma Ida. "The end of the world is done come," shouted Homer, "and you slept right through it." "It was just Fibber's closet," murmured Grandma Ida, her eyes lighting on Clayboy, who was disgustedly slopping the dasher up and down in the churn. "You want me to do that for you, honey?" "You want to, Grandma?" "No, I do not, but I'd a heap rather do it than see you take on so." Gratefully, Clayboy moved the butter churn to a position by his grandmother's chair, and she took up her chore with considerable energy. Olivia was trussing up the turkey when she heard a knock at the door. She delayed answering the door for a moment, fearing bad news. Clay was late. Had there been an accident? Was someone waiting there to tell her that Clay was hurt or dead? She pushed the turkey away, rose from her seat, and still shadowed by apprehension, crossed and opened the door. The caller was Birdshot Sprouse, a tall, obliging, not too bright boy, no older than Clayboy, but already a man. Birdshot got his name from a fight he had with C.C. Harkins over a coon. When each of the boys had claimed the prize for a long midnight scramble through creeks and gullies, C.C. Harkness had settled the matter by unloading his double-barrel 21-gauge shotgun in his friend's general direction. Several of the pellets entered Birdshot's left wrist when he raised his arms to protect his face. Doc Campbell had removed as many of the pellets as he could find. When the wound healed over, Birdshot discovered that some had been left behind. He found, too, that by clenching and unclenching his fist, he could make the little blue dots just beneath the skin move about across the sinew and veins. It was kind of a curiosity, and it gave Birdshot a name and made him famous in the community. Birdshot was the son of Skunk Sprouse, who made a slim living as a fur trapper along the Rockfish River, where it cascaded through the pass on the other side of Spencer's Mountain. Home to Birdshot was where he laid his head. Sometimes it was at his father's shanty, but more often it was wherever he happened to be when night fell, in some farmer's hayloft or in the back room of the pool hall. Birdshot did odd jobs about the village. He would help slaughter hogs for 50 cents. For $1, he would hoe corn in the blazing hot sun from dawn till dusk. He had worked often for Clay Spencer, was devoted to him, and he knew that Olivia would feed him if he appeared at mealtime. "Come on in out of the cold," invited Olivia. Birdshot stepped just inside the door, closing it behind him. There he waited for further instructions before venturing into the room. "Merry Christmas, Miss Livy," he said with a shy smile. "You too, Birdshot," replied Olivia. "You had your supper?" "Yes, ma'am. Had me a can of Vienna sausage and a box of crackers and a bottle of knee-high down at the pool hall." He peered off into the adjoining room. "Where's your boys and girls?" "They're in there listening to Fibber and Molly," answered Olivia. "Go on in if you want to." "I got a surprise for 'em," said Birdshot proudly. In the woods or on the river or out in the fields, Birdshot was right at home, but he wasn't too sure how to act inside a house. He didn't seem exactly certain how to get from the kitchen door to the living room. Olivia solved the problem by leading the way. "Hey, Birdshot," called the children. "Hey, everybody," said Birdshot. He beamed with the importance of news not yet shared. "Birdshot says he's got a surprise," said Olivia. "What's that?" asked Clayboy. "They got a missionary box down at the post office. Woman just brought it from Charlottesville on a truck. Says she's going to start handing out things just as soon as they get a crowd." "Let's go!" Becky shouted. The children shot up from their seats like a covey of quail taking flight. "Wait a minute," cried Olivia. A chorus of groans sounded as the children paused in their headlong dash for the clothes closet. "You've forgotten something," said Olivia. Mystified, the children paused, trying to think what it was they might have forgotten. "We don't accept charity in this family," said Olivia. Groans of despair flooded the room. The disappointment in the children's faces was almost too great for Olivia to bear, but she stood her ground, knowing how greatly Clay disapproved of accepting any handout. "Aw, shoot, Livy," scolded her mother. "What wrong can it be in 'em getting a toy or an apple or a candy bar? Clay feels real strong about it. He won't even allow me to take the WPA food the government's handing out." "There's such a thing as a man being too proud," said Ida, and pursed her lips to show her disapproval. "There's such a thing as a man providing for his own," said Olivia hotly, "and Clay Spencer does that." "I don't see him in evidence nowhere tonight, providing for his own," said Ida triumphantly. "He'll be here," said Olivia. Birdshot Sprouse shifted his feet uncertainly. He realized that he had precipitated some family crisis. He knew no way to relieve it and had no idea how to extricate himself from it. "Mama, couldn't we just go down there and watch other people get things from the box?" asked Clayboy. "What fun would that be?" asked Olivia. "It's something to do." "Isn't it something to do sitting here listening to the radio and waiting for Santa Claus?" "I'll be going," said Birdshot, and waited for someone to dismiss him. "I'll walk along with you," said Clayboy. "Get a little fresh air." His statement was a challenge to Olivia. The younger children still had to ask permission, but he had reached the point with his parents where he could state his intentions and sometimes meet with no opposition, usually much to his surprise. Olivia considered objecting, but the sight of her tall, almost man son stopped her. Where had the growth come from so suddenly? It seemed only yesterday he had reached her shoulder. Now he was actually looking down at her. "Can't we go too, Mama?" asked Shirley. "We won't take anything from the missionary box. We'll just watch," pleaded Becky earnestly. "Please, Mama," several voices said. "Ah," said Homer, "let 'em go, daughter." "Well, as long as your brother's going," said Olivia, "I don't see what harm it can do to watch." There was a traffic jam at the clothes closet as the whole brood dived in, and each somehow came out with his own jacket and warm sweater and overshoes and galoshes. Patty Cake had to be helped on with her snowsuit, but a system had evolved where each of the older children automatically helped one of the others until the entire group were dressed. "Don't y'all stay late," called Olivia as the group trooped out of the door. "Hold Patty Cake's hand." With Clayboy leading the way and Birdshot carrying Patty Cake on his shoulders, the children made their way through a path made by Clayboy's tracks. The feathery snow sifted gently into their tracks, obliterating them almost as soon as they were left behind. There was one street light in the informal square which made up the cluster of buildings where the village business was conducted. The post office, the barber shop, and the pool hall sat side by side. Directly across the street was the building called the commissary, which in better days had housed the company-owned general store as well as the business offices of the company which operated the mill. Railroad tracks led off past the back of the commissary to the gang room, which before the company had closed was filled with light and grinding sound night and day as the great diamond saws cut the huge blocks of soapstone into manageable slabs. But this night the gang room and the commissary and the post office were dark and silent. A misty light spilled from the windows of the pool hall, but the frosted windows cut off any view from the outside of the sinful gambling and whiskey drinking and oath-saying that went on in that wicked place. Birdshot and Clayboy herded their little tribe of Spencer children through the crowd which had gathered around the truck. The grinding poverty of the Depression years had already stamped the older faces with a gaunt gray pallor, but the prospect of a gift, of some slight change from the ordinary, the elusive Christmas spirit, had animated thin faces and brought hope to defeated eyes. Each newcomer joined the group silently, without any greeting to his neighbor. They were proud and independent people, accepting any kind of outside help when against their grain, but they had put aside their pride this night so that their children might receive some token of Christmas which they themselves were unable to provide. Gifts were already being passed out by a small, determinedly cheerful lady in a fur parka, ski pants, and Wellington boots. She had discovered the area in the fall when she and her husband had driven along the backcountry roads to admire the autumn leaves. Few of the people knew her name. She was called simply the City Lady by those to whom she had distributed food and clothing on trips she had made following her discovery of the proud and suffering community. The children, with the exception of the Spencers, formed an orderly line, and as each child accepted a gaily wrapped package, the City Lady called Merry Christmas and gave each child a hug or a pat on the head. The Spencer children watched, their eyes wide with wonder and envy, as some child would shyly accept a gift, have the wrapping torn from it by the time he returned to his parent to discover baseball bats and wind-up toys, some that worked and some that only worked a little bit, doll clothes, warm socks, slightly used gloves, handkerchiefs in boxes, sweet-smelling soap, music boxes, hand lotion, sparkling rings, a mechanical duck that quacked and walked, metal bracelets, an alabaster egg, a fire engine, a goldfish bowl containing colored rocks and a turreted castle, and a kaleidoscopes which, held up to the single street lamp, turned the scene into the memory of 1,000 shattered rainbows. Bitter looks were exchanged among the Spencer children. More than once Becky started to join the line waiting for toys, but Clayboy's stern look restrained her. "Look!" cried Claude Winston to his father, displaying a pair of used but still serviceable ice skates. "See what I got?" exclaimed Willie Witt, holding up a little red train engine which chuffed smoke and rang a sturdy little tin bell when it was wound. "The Bobbsey twins," said Elsie Berman ecstatically, then placed the book inside her coat to keep it from being spoiled by the falling snow. "Here's one for a big boy," announced the City Lady. There being no big boys who had not yet received presents, the lady pointed to Clayboy and offered the present. "You?" "You take it, Clayboy," urged Birdshot. Sheepishly, Birdshot moved toward the center of the circle. He muttered something inaudible when the City Lady presented him with a large pack and called Merry Christmas. Birdshot did not know what the package contained, but he felt some need to show his gratitude. In desperation, a way occurred to him. Other people had found it entertaining, and besides, he had nothing else to offer. Mutely, he raised his left wrist and furiously clenched and unclenched his fist. The city lady seemed not to understand what was expected of her until Birdshot pointed with the index finger of his right hand to the spot underneath his skin where the birdshot pellets danced their grotesque ballet across sinew and vein. The city lady appeared for a moment as if she were about to back away, but then she looked out into the crowd where she saw one person indicate his own head with his index finger, then slowly revolve the finger. The city lady herself was possessed of a physical abnormality. She was double-jointed, and in reply to Birdshot's traveling pellets, she stuck out her hand and began rapidly revolving her thumb a full 360 degrees. In his fascination, Birdshot forgot to continue his part of the performance, but continued to stare until the lady brought her own performance to an end. But there in the wet snow, in the cold December night, Birdshot Sprouse experienced a unique kind of communication which he had never felt before with another human being. He had reached out to touch someone, and that someone had not turned away, but had reached back. "Merry Christmas," said the city lady quietly. Birdshot nodded. "I'm beholden to you," he replied, then turned and ran back to the Spencer children. "Open it," urged Clayboy when Birdshot returned to the group, still holding the bulky package, showing it to each of the children in turn with a sheepish grin. Clumsily, Birdshot tore away the wrapping paper to reveal a rich brown tweed jacket with leather patches at the elbows and buttons of real leather and a soft brown silk lining. "You take it, Clayboy," said Birdshot. "It's too nice for me." "Put it on and stop being silly," said Clayboy. Birdshot slipped his thin arms and shoulders into the jacket, and the transition was almost magical. The boy seemed to stand taller. The long skinny wrists were covered, and his normally inexpressive face took on an appearance of intelligence and attractive alertness. "How you feel?" whispered Clayboy. "Like a dude." Birdshot admitted with a blush and looked around at the crowd, saw himself reflected in their eyes, and found they were looking at him not as an oddity, but as a man. It was a night of miracles. "And here's one marked for a little girl. How about you, dear?" called the city lady and beckoned to Patty Cake. Spellbound, forgetting her mother's admonishment about accepting charity, Patty Cake moved toward the bearer of gifts. Clayboy reached for her, but she was beyond his grasp. The other children pressed in against Clayboy with urgent whispers. "What's Daddy going to say?" "We won't tell him. He'll find out. We'll hide it till he's gone back to Waynesboro," Clayboy replied. Patty Cake accepted the present, thanked the lady, then ran back to her brothers and sisters. They crowded around her in a tight little circle to watch her open the rectangular box. Two small, elegantly shoed doll feet appeared as the box was opened and the tissue paper folded back. Then two pink dimpled knees and the beginning of a crisp white organdy dress. "Oh, and oh," murmured Patty Cake with each new revelation of the doll, until at last the face came into view. She stared down at it for a moment, the delight in her face still shining, and then her cries of joy turned to sobs. "What's the matter, honey?" asked Becky. Patty Cake held out the doll. Suddenly thrust from an upright to a horizontal position, the doll cried, "Mama!" and its yellow hair fell away from around the permanently arched eyes to reveal that its face was cracked apart from its hairline to its throat. Some ineffectual attempt had been made to glue the face together again, for little beads of glue had formed along the separate sides of the face, but the repair job had not lasted. "It's ugly," cried Patty Cake, dropping the doll in the snow and burying her face in Clayboy's lap. "I'll fix it, honey," said Clayboy, comforting. "It's scary," sobbed Patty Cake. The city lady, perplexed, looked out at the children and then called, "What's the matter over there?" The city lady started toward the group, now knowing the problem, but bent on making amends. Before she reached them, a great feeling of shame swept over Clayboy. He felt that he had betrayed his father and brought dishonor to the family. He reached down, scooped Patty Cake up in his arms, and led the way off toward home. Not one of them looked back to their friends and neighbors who had lowered themselves by accepting something they had not earned. No one spoke on the way home except for Becky, who cursed aloud to the night and the snow. "It's just like Daddy always claimed," said Becky bitterly. "Nobody ever gave away anything worth keeping." And for once, everyone was in complete agreement with Becky. Kind of a sad ending, a sad place to stop right there, but we'll stop right there for today. Really, really sad. We'll go back to the very beginning, talking about them listening to the radio shows. I've never listened to a story like that on the radio, but I am a very voracious reader, as you might guess, since I like to read on YouTube here to you. I love to read books. I can just picture all the different things going on, and especially a book like this, you can just see their faces and see the snow and birds shot at the door. Your mind can just imagine all that stuff. Well, I've heard people that did listen to those radio shows say the same thing, how they could just imagine them, and it was better to them than maybe TV, once TV come along. Now, recently in a book I was reading, we talked about radio shows, and a lot of people said, and I didn't know that you can find them, some of those old shows. So maybe you could find that one that the book mentioned. You can find them online, and then you could listen to them. But I've never done that, but I'm sure that it would be good to listen to them, just like audiobooks today, or if you enjoy listening to the books that I pick out. I really love reading for that same reason, because my mind can just imagine and go all the places that they're going and picture all the things that are going on. And speaking of Birdshot, he's an interesting character, and don't you wish you could have seen him doing his hand and watching the birdshot there? Thank goodness the boy that shot back at him over the coon didn't hit him, didn't kill him, but I guess in the wind-up maybe Birdshot was glad that he did get injured enough to leave the birdshot in his arm, because it made him, like it said, made him kind of famous in their community, and then give him his nickname, Birdshot. So he sounds like a really interesting character. It's that having nicknames is very, very common in Appalachia, maybe in other places too, but definitely in Appalachia it's very common for people to want to nickname you something. We like to do that to each other. In fact, I know if you've been watching my videos for a long time, my name, Tipper, that's a nickname. It just happens to be one that I was given very, very early when I was learning how to walk, and it just took over my real name. So it's very common in the mountains of Appalachia to give nicknames. Pap was one that really liked to do that. He would name different kids. Usually he'd start calling them something, and sometimes it would stick. I'm positive he's the one that started calling me Tipper. My brother Steve was afraid I would tip over. Instead of saying fall, I have no clue why you wouldn't just say she's going to fall. He'd say she's going to tip over. She's going to tip over. And I'm sure Pap's probably the one that started calling me the Tipper, because I was about to tip over all the time. Anyway, but I can think of especially boys that was Steve's age that played ball with my older brother Steve. A lot of them, their nicknames that Pap give them followed them into adulthood, followed them all the way through to adulthood, just kind of like mine did. So that's very common. But Birdshot sounds very interesting, and a character that, like the part that wherever home was where he laid down his head, but he seemed so likable, and then was a hard worker. He would hoe corn, it said, from daylight till dark, and so it seems like he was a really interesting character though. And I liked when he said, when they give him the jacket, when he got the jacket and took it, and Clayboy said, "How do you feel?" He said, "I feel like a dude." It's funny. I think sometimes even I think of, I would if I mean, when you just hear the word dude, my mind goes to like the kind of the surfer kind of culture, and dude, and you think of all the maybe far out things that goes along with it, the far out, and all those kind of different little pieces of language that kind of fit like the surfer dude. I'm trying to think of like the one that I can't think of it. If Corey or Katie or Matt was here, I could ask them, but who it is that I'm thinking of in my mind, I can just hear their voice, like a TV character, Anyway, but it's so you think what's funny that's in this book, in this old book, and, describing Appalachia here, but Pap used that word a lot. He would say that, he was a smart dude, and so he used dude in that same way a lot, so I liked that part, jumped out to me. And then the ending, kind of sad, makes you wonder, were they proud to a fault? What it's kind of like Grandma Ida was saying, what would it hurt to let them have something there? But then you can see that, Clay, that was just something he believed in, Clay Spencer, the father, and he wanted to do for his own. He wanted to take care of them. And I wouldn't say so much today, but in days gone by, there was a really strong sense of pride in the people in the mountains of Appalachia, that they didn't want to take help. They didn't want to accept what they would call charity. They wanted to do things on their own. It's not like that as much today at all, but definitely in days gone by. So I can see Clay just wanted to help, and then it's sad. Of course, it's just fiction, but then, it's kind of like, then by the end, the kids, when they're on their way home, their whole attitudes change. They were mad at Olivia and Clay, even though he wasn't there, because they couldn't accept any of the gifts. But then when the little girl is scared by the doll with the broken face, then they're like, they were right. You can just see it's made them really lean into what their mom and dad was trying to teach them. And whether you agree with that or not, you can certainly see, though, that little experience solidified what they, probably were thinking. Well, Mom and Daddy were right, and we should have obeyed them and should have done what they said. Anyway, sad place to end on, but I hope you'll leave a comment and let me know what you thought about this part, and I hope you'll drop back by for the next reading, because we've still got to find out, is Clay going to make it home or not?